Well, hello everyone and welcome. My name is Erica DiRuggiero and I'm one of the three co-hosts. We are really delighted to bring today's discussions on behalf of three collaborating specializations. One in global health, which I have the honor of directing, the collaborative specialization in Indigenous health, directed by Angela Mashford Pringle, who I'm not sure if she was able to join today. And the collaborative specialization focused on power and development and policy, which is being led by Husseina Dinani, who I'd like to acknowledge who's here. And it looks like Anna Manuel Byrne, who also is involved in that, might be also online. So just to acknowledge who's been behind the scenes in helping to organize this session today. So today's session is really meant to provide an opportunity as part of an ongoing series where we've been exploring the topic of decolonizing research methodologies. And today's session is particularly focused on the intersection of decolonization and gender equity. And we are absolutely delighted to have two panelists joining us today, Dr. Amy Shawanda and Percy Lazar, who I will introduce in a moment. And as I mentioned, this is part of a series of ongoing dialogues that we really felt was important because this really requires deep learning, unlearning, and reflection about how colonization has produced structural racism and systemic forms of oppression for Black, Indigenous, and other people of color and other populations around the globe. Today's session will also talk specifically about gender and gender as an important determinant of health, and begin to understand that intersection between gender norms and the social construction of identities and the unbalanced power relations that are really important to further understand and deconstruct in achieving gender equity. So really, we're hoping to situate this discussion today at the intersection of decolonization and gender equity. So this particular webinar will explore, in addition to that intersection of decolonization and gender equity, the decolonization of research and educational methodologies at the intersection with gender. And during the session, learners will have a chance to hear the perspectives of two of our panelists. And then we'd like to invite you to engage in a discussion and follow-up reflections. So depending on how many people are in the room, we may have some breakout rooms, and we'll explain that in a moment. So just to give you an overview of sort of the agenda, after I've finished my opening remarks, I will introduce our two panelists. They will provide some reflections. Then we'll have an opportunity to have a discussion with the panelists and all of you. And as I mentioned, we're hoping to have some breakout room discussions where we have some initial questions that we've come up with to facilitate some discussion, but of course, we're completely open to your suggestions. So before I introduce our two panelists, I first would like to take this opportunity to acknowledge the land on which the University of Toronto operates. For thousands of years, it has been the traditional land of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and the Mississaugas of the Credit. Today, this virtual meeting is still the home to many Indigenous people from around Turtle Island, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to work on this land. And I would invite each of you, depending on where you're joining from, to reflect for a moment on what land you find yourself. And also, I would like to take this opportunity to acknowledge that I am a white settler who is continually committed to reflecting on my practice as an academic, and I really encourage all of us to really think about how we can reflect deeply on these issues. So while land acknowledgements are important, we're really hoping to deepen our reflection during these discussions. So it's my great pleasure to introduce Amy, Shawanda, and Percy Lazar. And I think we have circulated the bios for both of our speakers, but briefly, Amy is an Ottawa Kwe from the Wik-Wik unceded territory. She recently obtained her PhD at Trent University, so big congratulations. Her doctoral work was on Anishinaabe motherhood, identifying the challenges, tensions, and strengths of incorporating traditional teachings and pedagogies. Amy's master's research examined the smudging policies in Northeastern Ontario hospitals. And her research interests primarily lie with strengthening Anishinaabe thinking, being, doing, knowing, and living. She has diverse and multidisciplinary interests in Indigenous issues that include language, pedagogies, anti-colonial work, research methods and methodologies, dream knowledges, storytelling, and Indigenous health. Welcome, Amy. And I will also introduce Percy. According to, and I'm Ms. Sque Ways, personal introductions come before any other words. Way, your name is Percy Lazar, and I will invite you to perhaps to further reflect on that. And your introduction, as your bio indicates, is to provide an opportunity to acknowledge your person nationality and responsibilities in an era across the academic industrial complex of race shifters and pretendians, and its importance to your identity. And I will invite you to further expand on that. I know that you currently hold a position in the Indigenous Studies program with Wilfrid Laurier at the Brantford campus, and your research and areas of expertise are in Two-Spirit pedagogies, gender-based violence in Two-Spirit trans communities, and also Indigenous knowledge and Indigenous research methodologies and community Indigenous health. So a very warm welcome to you, Percy. And I would like to now turn things over to Amy to kick things off, and then followed by Percy, and then we'll have a chance to engage with the panel. So a warm welcome to you both, and thank you so much for making the time to be with us.
Thank you much for having me here. I would like to acknowledge the territory that I'm on, which is Michi-Sagi, the Mississaugas of Curve Lake. So this is the traditional territory that I currently reside on. Did my screen pop up? It's showing me that it's not on mine. Also, I'd like to introduce myself in my language. So Ani, Bidoski, Kwed, Indigenous cause, Wikwem Kong Don Jabla, Nogo Jawaning Doda. So my name is Bright Shining Light Woman. I'm Odawa from Wikwem Kong, and I am currently from Wiki. I am from Wiki, but I currently reside here in Peterborough. So I'm here to share two stories, not stories, but more of the research that I have engaged in. So I want to talk about first the Ballad, exploring dreams as academic references. So I want to share about my journey to Boajige. And what Boajige means is to dream, or that he or she is dreaming. And then I want to look a little bit into the significance in dreams. So as scholars, as you all know that are here, we don't really look at dreams as an academic source of knowledge, but for the Anishinaabe and many Indigenous people here in Turtle Island, but I don't want to speak for them all. I just want to speak from my point of view, is that we do have this, we get our knowledge from the spirit realm. And so when we were looking at this, there's so many literature written out there right now about how researchers and scholars get their research projects from the dream realm, and they co-create that with the spirits. And in that, if you look at Marie Batiste, She talks about it, and there's so many other authors out there that talk about their journey. Kathy Epsilon created a new methodology based on her dream. And so when I was coming up with Boajiga, I actually had a conversation with Manilani Aluli Meyer, who's a Hawaiian scholar. And so we sat down and we talked about our dreams. And so I shared my dream about how my son, my oldest son, came to me in a dream. And in there, I was living a different lifestyle than what I live today. And he came to me and he said, "Mom, I'm waiting for you so I can come to Earth Realm." And so the next day I woke up, I was like, whoa, did my future child just come to me in a dream? And so I started making the steps to change my life around. And so when he was born, I like during my pregnancy, I knew he was going to be a boy. I knew what his spirit was like. I knew already so much about him just because he came to visit me in that dream. And so when he was born, we went on this journey together of dreaming and knowledge sharing. And in Boajiga, it's so important to understand like our dreams have such an impact on the way we see life, and that we get knowledge that you just couldn't get anywhere else. I have so many examples in my article. I talk about the many ways that we obtain dreams. So there are many individuals out there that have this. And now I wanted to help Indigenous scholars and academics out there, researchers, to help translate their dreams into academic work. So when I had talked to Manilani, I wanted to address a literary gap and validate dreams, not for us, but for Westerners, because we already know our dreams are valid. We already know that knowledge is there. And so I wanted to encourage Indigenous students, scholars, and researchers to include their dreams into their work. And so I provide a template for reference for dream knowledges. I know I only have 20 minutes, so if you want to learn more and read more, I'm just going to go over briefly what some of the main points that I talk about. So in my article, I talk about ancestral spirits, and these can go back from long, long ago to the recent past, like thinking Indian residential schools, the ones that had passed, even to grandmothers that passed last year. But also ancestral spirits can be metaphysical, and they're the metaphysical beings, the ones that walked the earth before Anishinaabe were here. And then I look at spiritual, looking at it, I had to really differentiate an ancestral to meaning the past and spiritual meaning the future or unknown, or we have not met yet. So I really wanted to create a clear line and distinction of two very important ancestral and spiritual accounts. So when I talk about Nikanagana, all my relations, I also talk about inanimate and the inanimate and animate, sorry. And so the metaphysical part is where I was talking about Nanabojel, the first scholar, the first researcher who came to Earth. And there's many, many stories about Nanabojel, and he's one of our cultural heroes. Also, there's the Thunderbirds, the Nimkig, that we get so much knowledge from. They bring the rain, and we have Mishabishu, and he's the underwater panther and the other underwater serpent or Sabe, like the Bigfoot of these metaphysical beings, the Payasak, the little people that we have, and Nibinabe, the mermaid. So all of these are in our cultural stories, and they play such a significant role. And sometimes they come to us in dreams, and sometimes in daydreams. But also we can dream about elder brothers and sisters, the plant kingdom, the animal kingdom, the insects, the ones without legs, the snakes. We could talk about the mountains, the water, and the icebergs. And I included icebergs in more recently because they actually help shape the Great Lakes of where we are. And so they also bring in this knowledge. So we may have those dreams of our elder brothers and sisters. And I came up with some dream descriptors, and they're all each distinct in their own way. In the article, I do talk about my own personal experience and why I categorize these in their individual way. So a dream conversation could be, I've had dreams with a friend who has passed, and we have these conversations one-on-one. And so we visit in a way, we have these one-on-one conversations. So dream visitations could be ones without there's actual talking. And so I often dream of my grandmother who had passed when I was about 5. And when I have dreams of her, she never really talks. She all most often will give me like a nod, or she'll give some type of sign that she's visiting me. It's very rare that I will have this visitation, except for this article coming into fruition. I did dream about her where we actually had a conversation about this. A dream message can be something that you're given this message, and you're just like, it could be written in your dream, it could be something you stumble upon, and you're just looking at it like, what am I supposed to do with this? I'm not really 100% sure. And so you just kind of make sense of it as time goes on. Excuse me. So then there's dream interpretation, where you have this very profound dream and you're like, I know I have to do something with it, but I'm not really 100% sure. So I need to go consult somebody with this. So I encourage those types of dreams to be with somebody that you trust. And I say that because you just don't want to share it with anybody and they ridicule you. And so I really emphasize that in the articles, that talk to somebody you trust. A daydream also has happened to me where I had a vision. Um, so my daydreams are often like, I could be sitting there, sitting amongst the trees, and then I'll be walking out on a walk, and all of a sudden I'm daydreaming. I'm just in a trance where my body goes into the state of relaxation, and I'm walking, and I'm like, whoa, I had this really clear message come to me, and then so I need to just act on it or write it down. And sometimes if I can't access a paper, I'll voice record it. A prophecy and vision can also come to you. Most often in ceremony, we have that as well. That I know I've sat in ceremony where I've actually had really clear visions come to life, and I was like, okay, I need to sit on this. I need to act on it. And so these are the 6 dream descriptors that I talk about in the article. Some of the discussion and thoughts that have arisen since having this is accessing knowledge holders or elders, making sure that I really want to emphasize, if you do have a dream, that you talk to somebody that you trust, and making sure that they understand how to help you interpret that. I also encourage that if you're not a dreamer, maybe some dream journaling, like even if it was just like, well, I just slept from this time to that time. And then I talk about, again, the voice recording when you can't have access paper. Also, there is other ways to access dreams. Sometimes you don't always get that clear answer that you're looking for. You can offer tobacco. I know it's our traditional way to offer tobacco. I can't speak for all Indigenous nations out there, but that is our protocol when you're accessing the spiritual realm. Um, Also looking at integrity, because one of the questions I was thinking about was, what if somebody lies and they just make up a dream? Well, in our nation, we follow the 7 grandfather or grandparent teachings. And in that, I said, well, if you're going to lie in your paper, there's also academic integrity, but also what you put out there, that is going to be between you and creator at that point, you and the spirits. So you always want to make sure that you're doing this work in a good way and that you're not making things up. And then the last thing that has recently come up was in the area of consent. Is I had 2 people come up to me just like, I um I had a friend who went missing. Do I talk about her? Because she's often visiting me in dreams. And I said, well, that's a very touchy subject, and only share what you feel comfortable sharing. And this all came out on the topic of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. So I said, we use your discretion on what you want to share out there, because once it's put out there and it's written about, then it's out there. And then the other one we were talking about in the area was dementia, or those that can't very articulate themselves. And so we had this really great conversation. Again, it was just using your discretion, because if they were coming to you and they were being very articulate and they wanted you to act on research or bring some knowledge to the community, then absolutely, again, you could share it, but use your discretion on what you want to share. And then on my last remaining minutes, I want to talk about, excuse me, Anishinaabe motherhood. So my research was, I am a mother. I'm a mother of 3. I have 2 boys and a 4-month-old daughter. And so I was thinking about, what are the Anishinaabe maternal teachings? And I kind of looked at it from a cisgendered perspective. And I feel like that was the only way I could personally go, because I couldn't speak for LGBTQ2SQ, and I couldn't speak for non-binary people and all the very other family structures that are out there. And I felt like each of those could have been their own research project. So this is why I specifically looked at it from this perspective. And then I looked at what are the challenges, tensions, and strengths of practicing Anishinaabe and maternal pedagogies in a contemporary context. And one of the things both kept coming back to was this traditional kinship model. So we were looking at babies as the core, protecting them because they are ensuring our next generation. And then we also bring in older children and elders into the second sphere of this, because the children are going to help the elders, and the elders are going to pass the knowledge on to the children. And then we have mothers and fathers who are, that's kind of like the immediate family. But I also couldn't really put mothers, fathers, aunties, and uncles all in one, because they also make up the bigger family structure. And then we also have community that builds our Anishinaabe communities, but also community is our environment. So I couldn't just really leave out our community and the environment, because that is what sustains us in our nation. So this was both coming back to this model. The challenge was, how do we bring back this model? And then attention was, this model existed for some, but it was very, because of the legacy of Indian residential school, this was filtering in and made a lot of tension in our, there was some of our family members suffer from addictions. Some of them suffer from different types of abuses, and they bring in these unhealthy areas in. So that created a lot of tension within the families. But a strength was also bringing these together, but also putting those boundaries up where I don't want to bring in this toxic area into my family. I don't want to bring in these toxic traits. So one of the strengths that Anishinaabe mothers started doing was that there was this shift of intergenerational break. They were breaking these cycles so that the legacy of the Indian residential schools were not being perpetuated for their children. And so the grandmothers that I interviewed also said that they noticed this huge shift that was happening with the mothers of this generation, that they were putting a stop to. They were saying no and putting boundaries up for their children, and really breaking those cycles and rebuilding this model so that it looks a lot healthier. So here are the teachings. I had 14 teachings that came out of the area. And so I had birthing stories that were part of our creation stories. And these creation stories are very foundational to a child's identity. So they wanted to bring those birthing stories back and having that creation. Fathers were not often in the pictures, but mothers are saying, we want fathers back. And if the father's coming back, we want the fathers to be healthy. Conception, pregnancy, and birth was really looking at bringing those traditional teachings back. Placenta burials were becoming more normalized. Midwives were on the higher rise rather than going to hospitals. A lot of them defined what Anishinaabe motherhood looked like and what traditional parenting looked like. And the big thing about the pedagogy was living by our seven grandparent teachings. So we role model what we want for our children. A new teaching that I didn't even think was a teaching was the shawl teaching, and how it was a protective cover, and how we protect our children, and it grounds us. And so one of the main methodologies that came out was the cedar tree teaching, and I tied that into the research. So they were talking about the cedar teaching. The clan animals, otter and bear, had prayed for Dijamnido, the Great Spirit, to birth the cedar tree to us because the Anishinaabe were in need of assistance. And so when this tree was birthed to Earthside, they were given this medicine. And then so we used that medicine. We built our tiknik guns around that. A lot of mothers were starting to do cedar baths again with their babies because the trauma of birthing, so that we can cleanse your child and heal them and make sure that they feel rested and know that they're here. And that is the same with the tiknik gun, where they are swaddled snugly and that they are grounded here. And then a big theme that came out was resistance, excuse me, resistance and resurgence. Excuse me. Resistance and resurgence was looking at resisting colonial structures and bringing in the different types of family structures there are and normalizing that. And resurging our maternal teachings was very, very big. I'm just trying to be mindful of the time here. So I think that's it because it's 11:30. And now I'm gonna throw it over to Percy. Miigwech, everybody, for listening.
That was terrific. Thanks so much, Amy. You've really given us a lot to think about, really around the power of dreams and how to access them, and really appreciated your overview of the maternal teachings and different family structures and the impacts of colonialism on those structures, but this resurgence to reclaim these structures. So thank you so much for those wonderful reflections. So Percy, I think we'll turn over to you for your remarks, and then we'll have a chance to have an open discussion and questions with both panelists. Thank you.
Can you clarify for me remarks on their research or my particular body of research?
Right.
Yeah,
Sorry, my internet's not great. Can you repeat again?
Am I responding to their?
No.
Oh, okay. Oh my gosh.
And then, I'm sorry. I was just saying that after we hear from you, we'll have a chance to hear from others who are in the Zoom room to hear some of their questions. But over to you now to offer your remarks.
Okay.
Thank you.
I was nervous. I was like, okay, because they came in.
No.
Yeah. Because they came in with a PowerPoint, I just quickly put this together for visual folks.
No, that's fine.
And accommodations. I recognize orality in terms of Indigenous knowledges and knowledge production and dissemination is important, but also want to be mindful that people benefit visually from seeing something. So my particular body of research, I want to center 2S LGBTQIA+, reclaiming the circle as a decolonizing approach when it comes to health and wellness. And also the framework of all of us or none of us, because I think what lacks in knowledge production is an intersectional analysis. If we want to promote and have Indigenous excellence, it needs to include all the ways in which Indigenous people identify. And my particular body of work is the accumulation of 35 plus years. And one of the things that is first of its kind to be produced. And I'll, again, Percy Lazard, for my relatives in the room, yesterday was International Pronouns Day. So I want to share in the spirit of creating brave spaces, because it's unethical for me to say that this is going to be a safe space. Microaggressions, macroaggressions, harm and violence are still going to happen against two-spirit, indigiqueer, gender diverse relatives and kin. So I want to be a good relative and role model with my platform. My pronouns are they, them, theirs. And in my Antillean language, minim chirks is the word to refer to me as a transgender person. And again, I am fortunate to be part of a program that wants to promote Indigenous excellence, and 2S LGBTQIA+ scholarship is part of that excellence at Wilfrid Laurier University, Brantford. So with that, I welcome my relatives into the room from the institution, as colleague, as comrade, as learner, as community member. And I have folks here who are from previous institutions, and I welcome you and I raise my hands up to you. Who am I and what are some of my roles and responsibilities? I shared what's on a business card, but as white a squeezed scale I must identify who I am before everything else happens. I need to identify that the scale of people from Sinfincton, which translates to a village. Oh, I didn't put my timer on. A village between lakes, or a place to live forever, is where I come from. So I have a homeland and a people that claim me. Some of my responsibilities are of that of a firekeeper. In my internal governance system, to uphold and to promote and to sustain the 4 food chiefs, and their connections and relations to the land, other Indigenous people, settlers, occupiers, arrivants, because I also want it noted that Black folks are not settlers, but they arrived here and not by their choice via the transatlantic slave trade. And part of my role is to, consmusis in my language is to give hope as a helper. I'm a formally trained social worker. Yes, a social worker in an Indigenous studies program. But I am a helper first and foremost, and that has carried me with the responsibility and invitation and trust of community to do those things for the past 35 years. And I want to note that it's important to do this type of introduction, to name who am I, what are my responsibilities, who claims me, and where I come from in an era in the academic industrial complex of race shifters and pretend Indians, people who are causing harm to not only myself, but Indigenous colleagues, students, and community and the land. I also am an invited guest in the Dish with One Spoon in the homelands of the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, Huron-Wendat, and the Mississaugas of the Credit here in Toronto. Now that those are out of the way, a lot of my work has started with questions. Why are things the way they are? And I believe in terms of thinking, critical thinking and critical reflexivity and engagement started when I was 12. So I always say that I started my PhD when I was 12. And for those who know this process, I have a defense date and I'm preparing for that time to say, here is who I am, and by extension, my family, my community, and my nation. And I carry my ancestors with me. And here are the requirements for my doctorate. So I bring that energy with me today. And one of the things on my journey that I was able to promote and to create the first of its kind. So what did I do? When we talk about health and wellness, we need to talk about our 2S LGBTQIA relatives and kin, and the ways in which violence has impacted this particular community, my community. And I was the lead writer and facilitator for this document that came out this past April on the first year anniversary of the National Inquiry. I must say that of all the sub-working groups, my group was the first to complete their National Action Plan. And why is this important? Because October 4th, most recently, relatives and kin, we had the National Day of Action and Awareness. And I think one thing that I want to bring to the attention of folks is that people should and have shared missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. But it's important that this work happens because with the birth of this nation state country already started to cause harm and violence against those most sacred women, girls, two-spirit and trans folks. So I felt this work was necessary because I want to share in the spirit of transparency and accountability. I am a family member to multiple relatives and kin who were reported missing and later found murdered or still recovering from being reported missing. So I want to evoke their names. Rest in power, Monica Jack, the youngest person ever to have taken in the Highway of Tears in unceded BC. Rest in power, Diane Stewart. Rest in power, Roxanne Louie. And continued health and recovery to the youngest sibling of us all in my family, Jaleesa Jasmine Cougar, who's still recovering from being taken and left by a church by 3 men. So this work is personal. This work, give me a moment. This work is not just a journal publication. This is a phenomenon that happens every day. When they say someone you know, with the recent National Truth and Reconciliation Day, September 30th, Orange Shirt Day, you know, as either a survivor, an intergenerational survivor, someone you know has had a family member that has been reported missing and or later found murdered. So again, everything I speak about has happened to me, my family, my community, and my nation, bio, chosen, extended. And this is why this work is important. So with these days that have passed, September 30th and October 4th, when you actively exclude the 2S LGBTQIA, you actively disappear, erase, add an additional harm to Two-Spirit, Indigenous, queer, gender diverse relatives and kin, their chosen family, bio chosen, for those who have gone missing and murdered. And I think it's important that we don't uphold the policies that have been enacted so violently with the birth of this nation state, Canada, on our community members, 2S LGBTQIA+. It started with the birth of the Indian Act, because then it gave us binary languages and binary ways to look at our community members and our relatives and kin. And with that, it more oftentimes with many different nations, not all, created heteropatriarchy, gave birth to heteropatriarchy, when many nations, much like my own, are matriarchies, meaning women, femmes, females were the leaders and provided direction forward for our people in a good way, as Anishinaabe people say, Minapamatsulen. So in the development of that work, which the document is the first of its kind, really speaks to the experiences of 2S LGBT and the ways in which they have violence enacted on them systemically, interpersonally, and with ongoing settler colonialism, and with resource extraction. Not only are women, girls, Two-Spirit, and gender diverse folks seen as disposable and without humanity, but it's for the upkeeping of resource extraction. So we as a global North country can continue to function, right? And be part of the G20. Yeah, so a lot of the things, again, related to 2S LGBTQIA+, and I'm going to say the whole acronym because it's important that you say the whole acronym, because you are letting folks like me and family members know that you see us and that you value that what we went through or that what we experience is valid, and that you are potentially a brave person that we can be in community around violence and the ways that violence happens on the daily with us and or our community members. And again, to go back to the September 30th, the first annual National Truth and Reconciliation Day. I mean, I wish I could go to Tofino. I wish I could have had a holiday from the ways in which violence happens against me and my community and my nation. But the 2-5, my relatives, that Woka Nation, and I know with the TRC, everything that I bring as a critique, the ways in which knowledge is shared about Indigenous people, documents are produced about Indigenous people, that they continue to actively tag us on at the end, because I know there's only half a page in the thousands of documents in what for the Truth and Reconciliation about the experiences of Two-Spirit people. They say that 150,000 people, children, went through the Indian residential school program. And if we use empirical evidence for queer folks and queer theory, that 1 in 10, then that means 15,000 of those children were two-spirit and trans and gender diverse. So when we say every child matters, that means it needs to include two-spirit, gender diverse, indigenous queer children, and not to hatch or paint and give a revisionist he, her, they story of the impacts of ongoing violence against Indigenous communities. So everything I do is in reaction to heteropatriarchy, wanting to center the voices and lived experiences of 2S LGBTQIA+ folks. And I think one of the things that Dalai Lama can learn and promote and support 2S LGBTQIA health and wellness is to include and not tag on the experiences that we particularly have, and have an intersectional analysis when you want to speak about the ways in which we can raise up our relatives and promote a health and wellness that is about strength-based, that is person-centered for the social workers in the room, and that is about promoting inclusion. Again, all of us are none of us. So that's what I have to share. It's an ongoing project. I hope that folks taking notes and having access, if you have the time, and I know people read things in inches each week, as those who are educators, those who are administrators, those who are learners. I encourage you to read this document. It's very important and vital. And if you're looking for direction, know that a council of two-spirit folks nationally and representative of every single intersecting identity contributed to this document that I have in my hands as a way forward to promote and minimize daily experiences of violence against 2S LGBTQIA+. And yeah, so it's a starting conversation. It's not an endpoint, but it's an opportunity for you to expand your medicine bundles, your toolkits, to have a lens that includes the experiences of 2S LGBTQIA. And with that, I'll turn it over to.
Thank you so much, Percy, for sharing your perspectives and really reminding us about the importance of not homogenizing voices and being very explicit about the intersecting realities of 2S LGBTQIA+, and appreciate you sharing these resources with us.
I would like to extend a really big thank you to both Amy and Percy for being here with us today, for sharing with us, for allowing us to learn, and encouraging us all to sort of question the structures that impact us, and also to be self-reflexive. I know that for myself, I've taken a lot out of this, and certainly will be thinking about this as I continue forward in my multiple roles that I have, not just within the institution, but also beyond. So thank you everyone for being here. And I know that the Decolonizing Methodologies Series will have other upcoming events, which will be publicized later. This event, this webinar was recorded, so a recording will be made available at a later date. So with that, in the languages that I grew up with, I will say Kwaheri or Kudafis. Yeah, and thank you.